My name's Brandon and this is Nickelodeon Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Nickelodeon shows and retrospectively review them. This week is what you guys have really been waiting for. Yeah, Nickelodeon Video Game History began last episode, but I don't think anybody was really on the edge of their seat for a Double Dare review. This week we're covering the first ever game based on a Nicktoon, the Ren and Stimpy show, Space Cadet Adventures. As we know, Nick got their start in video games very early on, but it would be well over 2 years between their first and second games. Space Cadet Adventures was released in November of 1992 for the original Game Boy. There's no colours here, baby. I'm talking about the OG Game Boy. We on our Akira Kurosawa shit here, boys. Obviously, this is the very first Nickelodeon game on the Game Boy. In the next 2 years, a staggering 7 Ren and Stimpy games would be released, gracing 5 different consoles. When a company wanted to milk a franchise back in the day, they really went for it. Nickelodeon were determined to extract every last drop. And when you look back on Ren and Stimpy as a whole, it's easy to see why Nickelodeon had that mindset. Ren and Stimpy was one of the very first Nicktoons, premiering on the same day as Doug and Rugrats in August of 1991. Rugrats would get their video game boom a little bit later, while Doug wouldn't get any video games until it wound up in the hands of Disney. Ren and Stimpy was a massive success right away, so they clearly wanted to strike while the iron was scalding hot. Because this is a video about Ren and Stimpy, I'm pretty sure I'm legally required to announce that the show's creator, John Kay, is a massive piece of shit. The show has been revived twice too. The first came in the form of adult party cartoon on MTV in 2003, while the second just happened recently, with Comedy Central announcing a new revival series, with no John Kays allowed. The first developer tasked with bringing Ren and Stimpy to life in a video game was Imagineering Inc. They were an in-house dev team for Absolute Entertainment, a publisher that went bankrupt way back in 1995. I wasn't even born then. I'm pretty surprised to see they were able to get away with using the Imagineering name. Seems like something Disney would have snuffed out and sued them into oblivion. Imagineering started in the late 80s, cutting their teeth on the Atari 2600. They would eventually go on to develop games like Ghostbusters 2 and 5 different Simpsons video games. Their work history shows that they were trusted with some of the biggest intellectual properties in the world at the time. This also wasn't the only time they'd develop a Ren and Stimpy game. The following year they'd release Buckaroos with a $ for an S because they were all about that cash money. They would immediately become defunct afterwards. Our publisher for this title was THQ, and man, I really miss THQ. They were the undisputed kings of licensed games, and yeah, most of them were bargain bin fodder, but finding that diamond in the rough always felt that much sweeter because of it. THQ Nordic are kind of continuing that spirit. Heck, they remade Battle for Bikini Bottom and Destroy All Humans, but it doesn't compare to the OG THQ's heyday. Finding reviews for Space Cadet Adventure is pretty tough in 2020, especially now that Metacritic killed off game rankings. Luckily, I had the foresight to gather all of the game rankings averages for games that needed them a long time ago. This game had a 6.2 average review score on that site. According to Wikipedia, Space Cadet Adventures received middling reviews and was praised for its faithful humour and visuals, but criticised for its repetitive and unimaginative gameplay. This is the first ever Nicktoons video game though. It could be the most notoriously awful game, and I'd still be excited to check it out. But before we dive deep into it, make sure you're subscribed. Not only is Nickelodeon video game history beginning, but there are brand new games on the horizon too. Ben 10 Power Trip releases on October 9, while Nickelodeon Kart Racers 2 Grand Prix is supposed to come out in the same month. There hasn't been an official release date announced, but every Australian retailer is listing the date as October 6. Who the hell knows what's going on with it? If that's to be believed, October is going to be a jam-packed month. To make sure you catch it all, throw me a sub. But now, on with the review. Space Cadet Adventures advertises itself as a thrilling space adventure set across 4 unique levels. And look, it's hard to argue with the 4 levels part. It certainly has those. Is it thrilling though? The game kicks off with a cutscene, which I wasn't expecting from a Game Boy game. Ren decides to go on a spacewalk because apparently that's how they've been getting their food, when Stimpy accidentally cuts his lifeline and sends him out into space.
Monkeys in outer space,
think this game is loosely based on the Space Madness episode from the first season of the show, and when I say loosely, I really mean that they're both set in space. They don't have much in common outside of that. What really struck me about this cutscene was that it kind of impressed me from a graphics standpoint. Ren and Stimpy has such a strange and distinct art style, which I think was captured pretty well. I can't imagine it would have been easy to nail in a sprite-based game. The extent of the cutscenes is also admirable too. Going into this, I was expecting Space Cadet Adventures to just be pure gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, is literally anybody surprised that it's a basic 2D side-scrolling platformer? Nickelodeon got into video games so early that a lot of these titles are going to be in the same genre. You were pretty limited with what you could do 30 years ago. Pressing A makes Ren or Stimpy jump. You use them individually for 2 levels each. Good lord, is this the floatiest platforming physics ever? Clearly they've designed it like this because of the space theme, the whole low gravity business, but it does not feel good at all. The longer you hold down A, the higher you jump. I guess this is kinda neat, but I can count on one hand the amount of times I was required to do a small jump, and those examples all came at the very beginning of the game. B is your attack button. Ren does a pathetic little karate chop that is more hassle than it's worth, while Stimpy has a ranged attack. I think this was a spitball or something, kinda hard to tell here. And if that's the case, really Stimpy, spitting, in 2020, in this climate, have some tact. By now you've probably noticed that Space Cadet Adventures is damn near the slowest platformer in history. Sonic the Hedgehog, this is not. The pacing of the gameplay is tedious, but it could have been worse. The screen is so zoomed in that if they did attempt to speed it up, it would have been disastrous to control, even more so than it already is. The controls aren't the only major issue here. One of the most recurring frustrations for me was that it was never clear what is and isn't a platform. Because they stuck true to their 4 unique levels promise, each level you go to is visually distinct. That means once you decipher what the fuck you can actually land on in a level, you find yourself whisked to a new location where you have to learn the environment all over again. Like, look at this bouncing toaster section. When I came to this, I assumed I had to use them in the platforming in some way, like I had to bounce across them or something. But in reality, I had to jump onto this ladder that really seemed like it was just part of the scenery, then jump onto this box thing which definitely screamed, I am just set dressing and not a platform. I was constantly blown away by what I could and couldn't stand on. These little dots? Sure, you can stand on them. Because the environments massively change from level to level, you end up just taking a bunch of leap of faith style jumps as you try to figure out what the hell is going on. Watch me climb up this cliff face. Does anything about this look natural? This is the correct way to play, yet it feels like I'm boundary breaking here and doing some forbidden speedrun tactic. You'll be glad to know that the abstract nature of Space Cadet Adventures extends to the enemies too. This game makes the worst possible first impression. You take about 2 steps forward, and then all of a sudden take damage. I guess this puddle of piss on the floor is an enemy? Oh look, it's a toaster. Slices of toast are used as health in this game, so maybe this is a friendly item or even a checkpoint. Nope, it's out to kill you apparently. These pulsating buttons? Out to kill you. Glowing rings that seem like part of the scenery? Out to kill you. It's best to assume that everything you see on screen is going to try and murder you. To make things all that much harder, your attacks are completely useless against most enemies. No, I'm not talking about the attacks being hard to utilize, they just don't affect 90% of enemies. Having an attack felt pointless most of the time when you couldn't do anything with it. To make matters worse, Ren's karate chop attack is hard to utilize effectively. With Stimpy's spitballs, you can at least test out whether an enemy will be hurt safely as you can shoot from a distance. With Ren, you're forced to basically stand on top of them. If they can be killed, great. If not, you've just wasted a precious piece of toast. In general, it can be a tough task to avoid taking damage in this game. Sometimes you just roll up on a bath that is clearly placed as a way to leap over a tall roadblock, only to find yourself being mortally wounded by water? Ren and Stimpy have to be the weakest cartoon characters in history based on some of the ways they die here. The icing on top of this shit cake is the amount of projectiles that fly into screen from out of nowhere, giving you barely any chance to react. If you like being hit by flying objects out of nowhere, you'll love this game. You pretty much have to have levels memorized to get through them. There's no other way to get through these kinds of sections otherwise. Look at these flying magic 8 balls. First off, why am I being attacked by these? Secondly, how am I supposed to dodge this without prior knowledge of their patterns? Here I am in another insane section. I need to take this elevator upwards to get to the next part of the level, somehow avoiding these lasers. You're required to cheese the hell out of this and have a photographic memory of the patterns. You will occasionally find health pickups and 1-ups scattered throughout levels, and the game even makes a half-assed attempt at offering some invincibility to get you through tough sections. Once per level, you'll discover a TV playing the Muddy Mud Skipper show. You're tasked with guessing 3 coin flips correctly to gain invincibility for a short period of time. This is so unbelievably dumb. The odds of you guessing all 3 flips correctly are way too low, considering all you get from it is a short burst of invincibility. If you've ever wanted to see a real-life example of a developer completely misunderstanding the fundamentals of how to make a platformer, Space Cadet Adventures is the game for you. There wasn't a single time I felt confident I was going the correct way in this game. The problem really starts when they introduce verticality to levels. The signposting and layout of levels is abysmal. Scrolling left to right is simple enough, but when they task you with going up and down, they throw all the rules out the window and make finding your way far harder than it needs to be. There are times where they reuse entire chunks of a level within the same level. I don't know if Imagineering Inc. were going for some kind of quirky level design thing at times, but to me it felt lazy. It felt like somebody had half designed a level and just said, screw it, copy and paste some sections I've already made and let's call it a day. Overall, much like a lot of games from the early era of video games, these terrible design choices make the game a lot harder than it should be. Every single thing you do feels way harder than it needs to be. In my short time with Space Cadet Adventures, I was entirely on the edge of my seat because it felt like some outrageous circumstance I couldn't possibly avoid was about to wipe me out. I really couldn't imagine playing this game without the luxury of save states. You kids back in 1992 were braver than the Marines. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm a pretty big fan of this game visually. It's not the standard bearer for Game Boy visuals, but I was impressed by the environments and character design mostly. I did have one vertical section on the final level practically tear my eyes out of their sockets though. And yeah, they really needed to make what was a platform way more obvious. Something needed to be done to make players understand that there was an object jutting out of the wall rather than being painted on the wall. I'm not really sure where else to bring this up, so just have a watch of the final cutscene.
What the hell was that?
Watching the ending might have been the strangest 30 seconds of my life. It just kept going. While I was mostly happy with the visuals, I can't say the same for the sound design. The tracks themselves aren't too bad when judged on their own. However, they fall into the trap of using one extremely short loop for each level. Playing through levels felt like some sort of advanced CIA torture. At times, it even pushed past being annoying and was downright painful. I really would have preferred to play in silence. At least then I could pretend this was some sort of weird Charlie Chaplin film. No prizes for predicting this, guys, but Ren and Stimpy Space Cadet Adventures is a dud. Outside of some solid visuals and it being the first ever Nicktoon video game, it's completely worthless. Imagineering Inc. have totally misunderstood what makes a platformer fun and enjoyable. It's just a horrible attempt. On top of that, it feels like they took all of 5 minutes to make this game. There is, no joke, 30 minutes of content here. If you go on YouTube, every long play of this game is 30 minutes or less. The only reason your playthrough will take longer than that is because some of their terrible design choices make the game really hard. The difficulty isn't the same as, say, a Mega Man game, where you get immense satisfaction from beating a particularly tough section. Here, once you do trudge past a torrid section, You mostly feel like you skated by on luck and pure chance that the game didn't decide to slap you down. There are a million more Ren and Stimpy games to come. Literally the next 3 titles released by Nick were for Ren and Stimpy, so I hope they're not all this bad. Next time, I'll be reviewing Stimpy's invention for the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive, depending on where you're from. Will a move to home consoles and Nintendo's arch rival provide a better video game experience for Ren and Stimpy? Make sure you subscribe to find out.